Good morning, folks. It's about 10:25 on Thursday morning. Chapter 4. We'll probably go for about 40 minutes, and then we'll maybe wrap it up later. And if you look on page 124, we're at the Introduction to Tissues, Module 4.1. So you get it. It also includes it. Now, when you look at this definition of the tissue, if you come down below, is an extracellular matrix. It's some sort of a for us, the matrix is going to be the material in which these specific cells and fibers float. Can be liquid, as we'll talk about blood and plasma before, or it could be sort of as we go through them. So when you come down in that first column, here it is, tissues, and so you've got epithelial tissues, and of course you probably already think about epithelium. We see a couple of lines. You'll see it says that the cells are really packed together. There really is no matrix, no extracellular matrix support. But you come on down to connective tissues. Connective tissues. And there's a third one called the muscles. Muscles is a type of tissue. And of course, you know they contract. So that's what they do. We'll get into those a little bit later in chapter 10. Nervous tissue. You think of the neurons and so forth, your brain and your spinal cord, and they can make messages, electrochemical messages. They can send them, they can receive them. So that's a form of communication throughout the body. So as you look over in the second column, you see that term extracellular matrix. So when they talk about ground substance, if you come on down, you see the next paragraph, that ground substance, we're not going to get into that. You'll see that word, but that's the fluid and the various substances that are in there besides the cells. We're not going to get into that. But we do want to know this. As you look on page 125, you come down the first column and you see protein fibers. And so the matrix, in many cases, is going to have a number of protein fibers. How do protein fibers important? As you look, you probably have heard it come down under reticular. It says forms a mesh work or a net. The meshwork tend to give support to organs. Okay, so much for those fibers. On page 126, there are some structures that they call cell junctions. We want to know the three of them. As you look in the figure 4.2, down at the bottom, junction. And those junctions are between, get through there and keeps you dry, the cells. Now, as you look on page 127, you come down about to look at cell membranes, at plasma membranes. We looked at transmembrane proteins and integral proteins and so forth. So you've got these proteins that help seal the space between cells. You come on down to desmosomes. Desmosomes are also made of a certain type of leakage there, but they still play a role in terms of holding cell tissue degree. And then you look at gap junctions. And again, small pores, as it says there, formed by proteins. You see that that's 3 different types of proteins probably. How are they different structurally? How are they different chemically? Think about that. Somebody might ask you something like that. But you got 3 different kinds of proteins there. And the gap junctions allow free movement between cells. There's a reason for that. We don't always understand everything, but we can speculate on that. Now we're going to leave that and we're going to look in the second, something to focus on. So epithelial tissue, and they have barriers. Our skin is an epithelial tissue, and you got other places too that we'll talk about. But they have barriers in most cases. So when you come down that column, you see 5 functions: protection, immune defense, secretion. There are certain secretions that come out on epithelial membranes, transport into other tissues, like your GI tract. That's a type of epithelium that lines the inside of your GI tract. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But they absorb things and take it into the bloodstream so that we can get it to other cells and do what we need to do with it. And then sensation, picking up signals in the environment. Is there a breeze issue? So you come over to page 128 and 129, especially 129. It's got a nice picture up there. And you want to know the structures of epithelial tissue. So you can see the little junctions as you look on figure 4.3. You can see that there are junctions that serve a purpose for those cells. You can see that the cells themselves produce what's called the epithelium, of coffee or ginger ale or something like that. And then you come down to where you see the underlying connective tissue. So you got a basal membrane, you got an apical surface, and the basal membrane rests on underlying connective tissue. Let's see if there was anything I wanted to say about that. Page 129 in the first column, you'll see that they're how they categorize epithelial tissue, epithelial cells. You can look at the top right column and you can see how they classify them. Number of cell layers. You either have simple epithelium, which means just a single layer, or you have stratified, and you could have a number of different layers. Some people describe them as tiles in your bathroom or your kitchen or whatever. Some of them are flat. They describe them as an egg, fried egg. Then you see the one that's made like a cube, and then one made like a column. So you mix those 2 categories: simple cuboidal, simple squamous, simple columnar, or you can have stratified. Well, the way they're put together tells you something about where they might be in the body and what their function might be. So we're going to look over, you see down at the bottom on page 129, you're going to see types of simple epithelia. So as you go over to page 130, you see these pictures. On the left, you see what looks like a drawing of what it would look under a microscope. The picture to the right where it says LM under the right-hand corner, that's actually a light microscope image captured by a camera, and shaped like cubes. Now, if you come over to page 131, first column down below, all the other pictures. And you see it says, if you look at the apical surface of the cells, they resemble fried eggs. Like I said, they fit together like tiles. The squamous epithelium is extremely thin. So you can imagine you wouldn't want to be wearing thin skin. Some people even describe other people as, well, they got a thin skin, don't they? And they're not talking about it physically. They're talking about you have to be very careful what they say, what you say about them, because they get all upset very easily. So they have a thin skin, so to speak, as opposed to a tough skin. You got to have tough skin. When you work in some places, they just make it kind of tougher for you. Anyway, notice it says in that paragraph, they're very thin, just one thin little layer, and it allows substances such as oxygen, carbon dioxide, fluids, and ions to diffuse. One of the places where we have simple squamous epithelium is in our lungs. Those little sacs that we pump and bring in air into those little sacs, and a little capillary right next to, let's say that this is a sac and here's a capillary. And so the oxygen comes in. It's very thin, so the oxygen easily moves into the bloodstream. The carbon dioxide comes out. So that's one place where they can be found. If you look at the last and line blood vessels, as a matter of fact, capillaries that I drew like this. Here's your alveolus over here. And so it's easy for the gases, O2 and CO2, to get in and get out. And so it makes it very simple to do that. One of the problems that we can thicken that layer, and it makes it very difficult to exchange gases. You look at the last 2 or 3 lines in simple cuboidal. It says simple cuboidal line structures where diffusion, rapid diffusion, now of course that's not going to require any energy, is needed, such as certain kidney tubules occur, so that substances can move in the body freely. Okay, let's come down to simple column. They're long, as opposed to being, they're long, like a column you might see on the front porch. Excuse me. And you see, it says they're nuclei generally in the basal portion of the cell. The apical plasma membrane are often folded into microvilli. Remember how we talked about that? That was associated with the cytoskeleton of cells. Not every cell has microvilli, but columnar epithelium in your GI tract can have that structure, which increases the surface. With microvilli are found in the small intestines. We've already mentioned that, the gallbladder, and in kidney tubules. Pseudo-stratified, was that it? Yes, pseudo-stratified is found, stratified epithelium is located. And then let's see. There's another one. Transport across simple epithelium. That's very easy. But if you got stratified epithelium, barrier through to another side of the layers of that tissue, which says stratified epithelial. And so here now you have where it says squamous epithelium and non-epithelium. And you look at the second sentence, it says in Keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. What we see and call skin, the outermost layers are dead. Matter of fact, we're really flaky people. Those skin cells are always falling off of us. The shirt that I'm wearing, when I take it off tonight, it's going to have a lot of skin cells stuck to it. The sheets that you slept on last night or the pajamas you slept in, they've got tons of epithelial cells in there. And so it's a really interesting life when you get into biology. Anyway, those keratinized stratified epithelial cells form a tough barrier. So forth, or putting that, rubbing up against things, and so that gives us a barrier. Second column, I want you to come down from the top where it says non-keratinized stratified epithelium. Acid down our mouth, don't we? Or acid down our throats. Keep on going. How many of you like a Pepsi Cola? I do. It might make me weird or whatever, but they're not. Unfortunately, we don't burn it all down here, but it's there for protection or the roof of your mouth. See if there was anything else I wanted to mention to you about that. I think, yes, one more. If you would, look at the bottom of the body, figure 4-7, and right above it, it says transitional epithelium from the urinary bladder. Look over on page 135. And you will see in the first column, transitional, and you come down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, and it says it's found only in the urinary system. It's good tissue to have it in that particular system. Look at the last 3 lines of that column, and you see it says, however, when stretched, and we do that all day long, don't we? We stretch our bladders. The apical cells can become flattened and contribute to the ability of these urinary organs to stretch. So it's got its place in our body.